Okay, so this masterclass is all about kind of sharing my experience with integrating Power Apps and Power BI. As the next slide suggests, my name is Dan Maddocks. Just to give you a bit of an introduction into my background, so I spent 10 years kind of working in the operational side of construction and engineering, being a site engineer and a site manager. Across both kind of construction developments and also geotechnical developments in and around the UK. For the last 3 years, I've kind of been working full time within the business intelligence space, predominantly working with the likes of Power BI and Power Apps, building solutions for one of the larger construction companies in the UK called Kier. I took the opportunity in March to start up a business by myself. I've been fortunate enough through this this difficult time to have had some clients which have been really great to work with. So the company, as you can see, is called Build Data, essentially specialising in business intelligence for the construction sectors. And what we do is we partner with specialists in the construction space, whether that be procurement consultants, specialists, or planning specialists, and essentially we work with those with those people to build solutions for companies within the construction sector. So one of my biggest clients at the moment is a leading house builder in Ireland, and essentially they're using business intelligence to drive their company and strategy for growth, which has been great. So moving on into, I guess, the purpose of this particular masterclass. So I'm quite a keen user of the Microsoft Power Platform, and in particular Power BI and Power Apps. I'm a heavy user. I use these tools daily, and I also delve into Power Automate, which has a lot of potential for helping drive business efficiencies. And Power Virtual Agents is certainly one tool that I look forward to getting to know over the coming months. So this particular masterclass is, like I mentioned, looking at the integration of Power BI and Power Apps. And I just wanted to kind of set a bit of a scenario as to where this particular integration might be appropriate. So in this scenario, we've been employed by a large construction company to assist with a strategic procurement project. And as part of that project, we've integrated the financial system with a Power BI model. So that work has already been done. And now that the company are able to use that data and actually track their financials and cost throughout the business and throughout projects and across their supply chain, what they would like to do is enhance that data with performance scoring of their supply chain partners. And this will all make sense in a moment. Just a few assumptions or constraints. The data needs to be collected in a user-friendly manner. The data that we collect needs to link back to entities within the financial system. So again, if we're scoring companies, that particular data that we're collecting needs to link back to that company entity within the financial system, such that we can do cross-analysis. In this particular scenario, that data cannot be written back to the financial system. So we need to find somewhere else to store that data. And I think we touched upon in the earlier session the potential that some of these data sources, like a SQL solution for storing data, would require an additional license. So again, just for this simple scenario, we're assuming that the business does not want to invest in any additional licenses. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start by showing you a solution, and then maybe work back from that and show you how it was kind of put together. So what you're seeing on the screen here is a user interface, and this is actually a Power BI report hosted in the Power BI service online. But what you're actually seeing is kind of two things here. On the left-hand side, you've got a Power BI visual known as a decomposition tree. You know, and as you can see, it's very interactive. I'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment. But on the right-hand side, this is actually a Power App. So you can kind of see what I've done here. I've in a single interface, we've got Power BI data visualizations, and we've got a Power App in the same solution. And what this allows us to do is use the Power BI visual to control certain elements of the Power App. So if I just show you how this works, if a user wanted to score a particular company within a particular project, so in this case, I've got project 68 selected. I want to add some data on how that one of these companies is performing. So I just click on add. Okay, now you see instantly that the Power App form has pre-populated the project name. And in the background, it's been designed to actually pick up the unique project ID as well. But what we do is we select the company. And in this case, the company wanted project managers and quantity surveyors to score the top 10 companies for each project based on the most recent spend with that company. So the decomposition tree here is just a really kind of neat and visual way of sorting those companies in that order for the end user. And what they'd do is they'd work their way down this list and create a form input. But as you can see, I've selected company 714. And again, the Power App has identified what I've selected in the Power BI visual and pre-populated the form. Now, you know, as well as kind of just preventing kind of the effort of having to type this information in, what this really does is it helps keep the data clean, and it helps keep this data that we're inputting aligned to these entities within the data model. So again, company 714 within the Power App, it's hidden, but essentially it's recorded the company ID as well. So quite simply, if I just select that company, you know, and don't focus too much on what all of this is. It's just a user input for scoring a company against different parameters. So how are they performing from a commercial perspective, quality, etc. Okay, so I'm going to submit that data now. And in fact, if I just show you where that data is actually going to reside, just for this this example, the data is going to write back to a SharePoint list, because that's a non-premium data source within the Power Apps ecosystem. It's actually free to use if you have an Office 365 license, and whilst it's maybe not as robust as a SQL database, certainly if you want something kind of quick and easy, then you know, a SharePoint list would be very useful. So as I submit this data now, you'll see that that particular row gets added. It's actually sorted by alphabetical order, so that there's that data I've just submitted within the gallery of the Power App. But it's written that data back to the SharePoint list. And you can see that because it tells me when that particular row of data was actually added or modified, which was a few seconds ago. So that's just a quick example of how we write data back to a data source, and equally that would work the same if you did happen to be using a SQL database. You know, it would happen instantly. You know, and the whole concept behind integrating Power Apps and Power BI, you know, as well as kind of making the user interface more friendly. The idea is that you can start to supplement data that you already have within your Power BI model. So, for instance, if I were to click on one of these companies, you can see I'm just adding some additional context to the Power BI model based on the data that's been input into Power Apps. So I can quickly compare that for this project. And actually, these company scores are across the organization, not necessarily project based with this tooltip that I'm showing on the screen here. But company 714, okay, maybe a bit weak in the design space, and you can quickly compare that to company 141, yeah, quite weak on sustainability. So that's one of the benefits, I guess, of Power BI. And Power Apps working together. Another neat feature that I just quickly point out before I kind of get into how we build this stuff is the concept of row-level security. So one of the other kind of user inputs with the Power App is an admin section. Now, obviously, not everybody will have access to this particular view, but the admins will. And we can control project or user access to particular projects through the Power App. So if I select on project access, again, for this particular project, and just as an example, I've added Ben Morris to that project. He's probably also got access to maybe a couple of other projects. But what I want to point out is that we can actually use the Power App interface to instigate row-level security on the Power BI dashboards. And just to kind of show you that in action, this particular view here can help me simulate what it would look like if Ben were to view this particular dashboard. So if I just add Ben, you'll see that the dashboard has dynamically filtered the data to the projects that I'd given Ben access to. And that does two things really. That secures the data in a Power BI model, such that he doesn't get access to anything he doesn't have permission to access. But it also controls the level of data input that he can make within the Power App at the same time. And that's simply because the form is set up to only work with the data that's in the Power BI visual. So he can only add data for project 68 and project 60. Physically he can't score any other projects across the organization based on this security measure. So that's kind of the end solution. I maybe want to take a step back now and actually show you how that's maybe built within Power BI and Power Apps.
Quick question, if I can, Dan.
Yeah, go ahead.
In terms of the scores as well, so in terms of Ben, if I say he can only score on commercial, could you constrain that as well?
Yeah, and that particular logic I would build into the Power App.
Yeah.
So I probably won't have time to go into too much detail on how to actually code the Power Apps, but certainly we would have logic, and I've done similar before. Is that if you really want to get down to a very granular level with permissions, then you can control that with logic in Power Apps. And for anybody that's used Power Apps before, it's the logic is kind of very similar to Excel logic. I wouldn't necessarily say that anybody could pick it up and build this level of permissions, security, and logic into a Power App, without some experience and knowledge. But if you understand Excel and how if statements in Excel work, then generally you can pick up Power Apps really quickly. So yeah, no, certainly that's possible, but I would deal with that in Power Apps rather than within the Power BI security model.
Okay, cool.
So we'll start with looking at the Power BI desktop file for this particular solution. So essentially that's what I've just shown you, and I've created a tab here for demo purposes. And what this is showing is that we've got the data model already set up. We've got the decomposition tree in place, but there's no Power App here yet, and I'm going to show you how to include that. So within the visualization pane of Power BI, you've got your different visualizations that you can select, and Power Apps is one of them. I can't remember if Power Apps is included by default, but if it's not, you can click on the Eclipse, get more visuals, and it will allow you to install the Power Apps visual from the Microsoft Store for free. If you click on Power Apps, you'll see that that's now inserted the visual into the report. Before you can start building the Power App or connect it to an existing app, you need to drag some of your data fields into the data card. So for this example, I've used job. So job in this case is actually a project. So we want the project number. We want the job description. And by the way, the data that's coming in to Power BI is actually a SQL database. But remember, we're restricted and we can't write data back to it. Hence, we're keeping it in the SharePoint list. So Dynamics Nav is the solution for the financial system, but the data is stored in a SQL database. So that's where the name Nav comes from. And I'm also going to be looking at kind of company information. So the Nav vendor name would be applicable, and the Nav vendor number. So that's kind of names and unique identifiers for both the project and the company. Once I've done that, you'll see you then get the option within the Power BI visual to either choose an existing app or create a new app. Now, just because of time constraints, what I'm going to do is I'm going to connect to an existing app that I've built, but I'll show you some of the elements of what I built whilst we're in there as well. So I'm going to choose the app. I'm going to select Project Hack Demo, and then add it to the report. Now, regardless of whether you choose an existing app or create a new app, you'll then get the option to make your way over to Power App Studio, which is what you'll need to do. Yeah, and you know, depending on the size of your Power App, it can take anywhere from kind of 20 seconds to maybe a minute or so to load. I've built really huge Power Apps in the past, and sometimes it did take a while. So now that we've got that open, I guess I just wanted to point a couple of things out. So as soon as you've been directed from Power BI to the Power App, again, regardless of whether that's a new app or an existing one, you'll see that this particular item here has been created within the app. It's called Power BI Integration. Now that's something that happens automatically. You actually can't edit that unless I guess you make changes to how you set things up in the Power BI report. But the first thing that I did was create a new page within the app, and I called it Power BI Gallery. So this is a page, Power BI Gallery, and within this page, I've created what is actually known as a gallery within Power Apps, and a gallery is just a list of data items that have been retrieved from the data source. In this case, the SharePoint list. And again, without going into too much detail, sorry, no. This data here is not coming from the SharePoint list, it's coming from the Power BI model. And you can see that up here because the items property for the gallery is set to Power BI integration.data. So when you create the gallery, that's what you'll need to type in to retrieve the data from Power BI. And you can't see the items yet, and I'll demonstrate that in a moment of this being populated, but essentially this section here, you see that you've got the very faint red line that indicates that particular box is relating to kind of one data entry within the data source, and I want to retrieve two things here for the purposes of the app, and I've inserted two labels. These are text labels. And what we want to do is we want to retrieve the nav job description. So in other words, the project name. And that simply is just a formula of this item dot, and then whatever your field or column is called in Power BI that you want to return. And then equally for the second field, I want to return the nav vendor name. And what I'll do is I'll just show you how that kind of looks in Power BI. And I've created a view so that you can kind of see this in action. So this Power BI gallery that I've created in Power Apps, when you're actually viewing this live, this is what it looks like. So these are the two fields that I've just populated within the gallery. Project and all the companies within that project. I'm actually not going to use that gallery from a user interface perspective. That's there in the background to help me identify data within the Power App. If I show you the scorecard, now this is a scorecard, and basically I've created a form within the Power App, and to do that you'd click on Insert Forms, and you get a couple of default options of inserting an edit form or a display form. So in this case, it's an edit form because we're going to be editing or adding data. So when you do that, you'll get a box. It might be blank if you haven't built it yet. But the first thing you want to do is populate the data source. And the data source in this case is a data source that I've added to the Power App called Scorecard 1. Within Power Apps, you have a data source tab, and that can be found on the left-hand side. And you can see that Scorecard 1 is actually a SharePoint connection, and that's a connection. You can actually see that tab that's just popped up there with the data set name. So that's connecting to a SharePoint list, which essentially is the one that I showed you earlier. When you connect to that SharePoint list, some of the fields will be kind of pre-generated for you within the Power App. And if they're not, or you want to add some new ones, you click on Edit Fields. These are the ones I've populated so far, but you can just add a field, and it'll give you an option of all of the columns you have within the data source. So I'm not going to add anything more at this stage, but that's how you'd kind of add selections or user input fields within the form. So the next part of this was kind of pre-populating some of these fields, and I just want to show you how I did that, and what I referred to in the Power BI gallery will make a little bit more sense in a moment, because here we've got a project name field, and by the way, I've locked it down so that the user can't actually edit it. And if you click on the field box and actually look at the formula that's been used to derive the information, there's a bit of logic in here which basically tries to understand is the form a new form? So is somebody trying to add data, or are they trying to edit data? So that's what the first part of this logic is all about. And again, you don't necessarily need to go into the detail with that at this stage, but what it's saying is that if it's a new form, then what you should do is you should use the item that is selected in the Power BI gallery that I showed you earlier. And of that selected item, we want to return the nav job description, aka the project name. So what's, and I really hope that does make sense, is that as I'm navigating through the Power App, you'll see what it's doing to the Power BI gallery page that I created earlier. It's in a sense filtering that gallery, and it's that context that's being used to pre-populate the user input form. So yeah, it's Power BI gallery dot selected, and I just know that when a user selects one of these items, then Power Apps recognizes that particular item has been selected because it's the only item in that gallery at that moment in time. So yeah, hopefully that does make some sense. And then it's very much a similar process for pre-populating the vendor name. And I think I mentioned earlier that we've actually, it's hidden, but you'll see here I've got a field called nav vendor number. So these are kind of the unique identifiers, and I'll just make one of those visible maybe, so you can see it. So that's an extra field that's pre-populated, but it's just hidden because the user doesn't necessarily need to know about a 10-digit number. They're interested in the project name and the vendor name. So yeah, quite simply, that's how I use a combination of Power BI and Power Apps to create a single user interface for populating and pre-populating data and writing them back to a source. And then you use the Power BI model to bring that data together and actually create some additional context. So that tooltip you can see in the middle, that's using both the financial data in terms of the hierarchy of companies versus projects, but then it's pulling that data from the Power App through the Power BI model. If you're using I guess a data source like a SQL database, you do have the ability to run direct query, which means that in effect, as you're updating data within the Power App, you'll be able to see that the data that you've input will be instantly reflected within the Power BI dashboard. If you're using, I guess, a data source where you can't use direct query, or you don't necessarily have any premium licenses for some of these data sources or Power BI, then essentially the rate at which this sort of data refreshes in the Power BI model will be dependent on your refresh schedule. So with Power BI Pro, you can achieve what's that, maybe 8 refreshes a day, which is in a working day, that's once an hour. And many clients are very happy with that. And again, if you're just using this in Power BI desktop, you could refresh as frequently as you want. It looks like I've still got quite a bit of time, so I'll just talk to you a little bit about how I managed to achieve that row-level security that I showed you previously. And again, just to recap, I'm controlling project access through the Power App, selecting a project and adding a user to that particular project. And again, that data, in this case, as an example, I've stored it within a SharePoint list. So you can see project number, project name, and who I've given access to. So there's a couple of steps that you need to kind of take to implement row-level security within the Power BI model. And the first one essentially would be to make sure that you're retrieving that access data. So in this case, you'll see that I've got a table in here called RowLevel Security, and essentially that's just retrieving the data from that SharePoint list I've just shown you. So that's the first step. Yeah, make sure you've got the data from the table within the model. Then the next step would be to build a relationship that you can use to filter data on based upon the information in this table. So if I just show you a relationship that I've used, where is it? RowLevel Security. Okay. So what I've done here is I've built a relationship between that table and the job table. Essentially, we're controlling users' access to a particular job or project. Relationship between the title column, which in effect is the project number, and the nav job number within the job table. So you've got a relationship there. In this case, it's a many-to-one relationship with a cross-filter direction of both. And I'd recommend setting it to both, because you then get the ability to use this security filter option. And I've found that this particular setting is what makes the RowLevel Security really tick and do what it's supposed to be doing. So that's the next step, building that relationship. Once you've done that, within the Power BI desktop app, you then get the option to set up user roles, and you'll find that within, I guess, within the report pane, modeling, and manage roles. And you can see here I've set up 2 roles for this example. We've got an admin role, and actually the admin role doesn't have any filters applied to it. That means whoever's assigned to that role can see everything. But if we look at the Power App user role, we'll actually see just by this flag here that I've actually filtered. I've applied a filter to the model. So what I've done is I'm filtering the RowLevel Security table based upon the username equaling. So the user email is actually contained within that table. It's the SharePoint list. So I'm filtering that table and that column on what we call the user principal name. Now the user principal name is that will actually return the currently logged in user's email address in the Power BI service. So if I'm logged in as Ben, that'll return ben@projectingsuccess.co.uk. If I'm logging in as myself, that'll be daniel@builddata.co.uk. So what that's doing is it's filtering that table on the user that's currently logged in. And because of the relationship that I've just shown you a moment ago, by virtue of filtering the RowLevel Security table, that is then filtering the job table, which in effect, because of my model, is filtering all of the other data that's contained within the Power BI model, because everything links back to a job project entity, either directly or indirectly. So that was kind of the third step, and then I guess there's one fourth and final step that you need to implement. And first of all, you need to publish this to the Power BI service. So that's the Power BI workspaces in the cloud. Once you've done that, you'll be able to navigate to the workspace. And it's actually you'll see that it's published when you published. You'll see that it's published the report, but the report will also have an associated data set. And if you click on the 3 dots, you'll get the ability to manage security. So this isn't actually about giving people access to the report, because you do that via the report sharing options. And by the way, if you want people to see the report, you have to make sure that you've shared it with them, either through the organization or to individuals. Generally, because we've applied RowLevel Security, you're more likely to distribute the content through security groups or even to the whole organization, but control RowLevel Security at a more granular level through what I've just shown you. But anyway, going back to data sets, 3 dots, we want to manage security. You'll see that this particular part of Power BI service recognizes the roles that I've built within the Power BI model, admin and Power App users. And then it's just a case of giving people access to that particular role. So in this case, just as an example, I've used Ben Morris. I've said, right, Ben's got access to this report. I want the security level filters I want to assign him to the Power App user role, which will propagate the security filters that I've defined, and then I've assigned myself with an admin role. So these can be individuals within the organization. When I'm building these for clients, generally we don't type people's names in. We have security groups. So for instance, if it's the commercial department that I want to give access to, basically we'll use a security group that contains all of the users within the commercial department, and then we just add commercial department, I haven't got that particular security group in my environment, but you can add that security group to the role. But what that does is it still respects the individual's permissions within the report. So even though you're using an overall security group, it's still very much respecting the security model, because it's all based upon the user principal name or the user's email address. So that's very brief insight into how I use or have used Power Apps and Power BI working together. I think it's a fantastic offering. It certainly has opened up opportunities for both myself and clients in the work that we've been doing. And I'm really looking forward to seeing what else is developed within the Power Platform, because things are moving on at a rapid pace. And what I was doing in Power Apps 2 years ago is completely different to what I can do in Power Apps now, and the same applies to Power BI. So yeah, hats off to Microsoft. That's the end of the presentation. I'd love to take any questions, or if anybody needs anything clarifying, just let me know.
So a big round of applause for Dan. Thank you, Dan. Good stuff. Yeah, thank you, Dan. Really appreciate it. Thanks for putting all that together. So if you've got any questions, please come off mute and ask Dan a question. Anybody?
Sorry, can I ask?
Yeah, go for it, Anne-Marie.
Hello. I'm not overly au fait with Power Apps, and I did send James a message actually during that. One of the challenges we had with the materials receipt app was the reluctance of the organisation to buy the individual licenses. Apologies for not understanding how that was done, but how was it you got round that on this particular solution?
Yeah, so I'll be honest. I think I mentioned that the data from the financial system was stored on a SQL Server database. Now, in the Power BI world, that's not considered to be a premium data source. So integrating that data with Power BI wasn't a problem, but integrating that data with Power Apps was a different story, because in the Power Apps world, SQL database is indeed a premium data source. So what that meant was we had an option at this point. Do we invest in premium, and in which case we'd need either a per app license or a per user license to build this solution, or is there another way that we can do it? And actually, when I looked at this more closely and kind of just took a step back, and I thought, well, actually, do we really need to be integrating Power Apps with a SQL database? No. Do we need to be writing data back to the SQL database? Actually, no. So in terms of the Power Apps license, it's just the standard Power Apps license that you get as part of your Office 365 offering. We've not used anything that requires the more premium features, and generally that's because we use SharePoint List as a free data collection or storage facility, if you like. So I guess how we got around it was basically by using the strengths of Power BI and Power Apps in tandem. So Power BI was pulling the premium data set, but actually in Power BI it's not a premium data set. So we kind of got that functionality in Power Apps just by virtue of embedding it within the Power BI report. Now I don't know if that actually answers the question, but that's kind of how I got around the need for additional Power Apps licenses.
Okay, thanks very much.
No worries.
Any more questions?
Yeah, Daniel, I've got a quick question on the RowLevel Security specifically.
Yep.
You're saying that's pulling through the RowLevel Security as defined somewhere else. Where is it defined at origin, and do you have to exclusively define it at that point? Or is it pulled into the overall Power BI model from somewhere else automatically?
So in this example, the origin of that data was the Power App. So let me just flick back to that.
I would say you probably need to link this to IDAMS. Right,
Was
so
that,
the
sorry?
identity and access management. So if you do it from an overall enterprise level, you can link it all the way back into IDAMS as well.
Yeah, and just to point out that this particular functionality I'm showing here is linked into the organization's Office 365 environment. So it's effectively Active Directory or Office 365 users are recognized, instantly. So this is the origin. This is how the data is I guess input through the Power App, but that's stored in the SharePoint list that I showed you. And then the Power BI model is retrieving that data from the SharePoint list, and that's where we're applying the RowLevel security. So it's defined in the Power App. It's stored within the data source. It's retrieved with Power BI, and Power BI applies the RowLevel security. It seems like a convoluted process, but actually it's very slick when you actually publish and let this stuff run. It kind of just happens seamlessly once you've set it up.
It sounds good. In any event of any complication, if you had to troubleshoot it, can you view the RowLevel security structure within Power BI, or do you have to go right back to Origin to look for any potential issues?
Yeah, so I mean, the first place I'd always start would be the tabular view. So if a user comes to me and says, oh, "What's going on? I thought I had access to this particular project," then you first thing you do is you check that the data that's being retrieved is reflecting that access. And I guess if the data is there and visible in Power BI desktop, then you kind of know that the problem's not necessarily within the file. The problem might be within the Power BI service, and that's your next level of kind of check to make sure that the data set has actually refreshed in the service. Because if there was a problem with the refresh, then this particular table in the service might not be up to date. If the person wasn't visible in this table, then you probably go back to the origin and actually check, well, have they actually been given permission to that project? And the answer might be no.
Okay, great, thanks.
Any more questions for Dan?
It's John here. I mean, it's not really a question, but had we have had Power Apps when we started down at the A14 four years ago, it would be a different world. It's amazing to see what you've come up with the tool, and we've dabbled with it for a little while, just on like a few apps here and there, but never really ran with it. But seeing what you've done here, it's a game changer. So yeah, good to see the capability of it.
Yeah, thanks. And like I said, that's down to Microsoft's developments. As much as my own curiosity. I mean, I'll be honest. I've just using Power Apps alone, I've built solutions that have helped a company to monitor its highest risk projects across the UK. Just through a Power App and with some other kind of automated data integration. But yeah, I mean the potential is huge. I'd say the one biggest drawback is that you can't. Oh, sorry. Let me go back a step. I got into a situation whereby we built a solution, and actually the company liked it so much that they wanted their joint venture partners to actually collaborate within the Power App. And the problem at the time was that you couldn't actually share Power Apps from business to business, like you can with some of the other Office 365 solutions. So after about a year of kind of waiting for that functionality, it finally came out, and you're now able to share Power Apps across tenancies and collaborate across tenancies, which is a fantastic achievement. But I mean, it would be brilliant if we could kind of build a solution that wouldn't require end users to have an Office 365 license at all. Even if it came at a cost to the host organization. And I think Microsoft tried to address some of that with the release of Power Portals, but from what I delved into, they don't necessarily compare to what Power Apps can achieve. So yeah, I mean the potential is huge, and it's only going to get better. I mean, recently released mixed reality functionality within Power Apps. You've got the AI builder functionality, all sorts of add-ons. But again, there is normally a barrier with kind of trying to explain to clients that, yeah, you've got Power Apps, but now you need to invest in upgrading for the AI capabilities or anything else for that matter. So, it's like anything with Microsoft, the stuff is great, but you've got to invest in the tools,
Do you find that it's in the reach of normal advanced kind of power users, or is it more of a you need a consultant to come in, build the app, and then they can kind of maintain it? Because I mean, we had originally thought that perhaps it was in the reach of a power user, but in delving in, it's been quite a challenge in some cases.
I think Power Apps should be used, and I think people should get up to speed with it and really think about how they can use it to improve their own business processes, within their particular function, their role, department, and the like. I really think it would be useful there. When you kind of get into the space of enterprise data collection and enterprise level apps, then there was always a risk that should we be allowing citizen development? And I probably, in my previous organisation, I definitely fell into that category. I don't come from an IT background. And I think the IT department almost saw what I was building as a bit of a risk, really. But it gained a lot of traction in the business, and it did start to take off. Kind of lost my train of thought there. But no, definitely, I would encourage people to use it, and the simple stuff, you'll be able to pick up relatively quickly. If you're looking to do anything more complex or enterprise level, then I definitely recommend at least engaging with a Microsoft partner or consultant like myself or John, or even Projecting Success for that matter, because it's kind of taken me kind of 2.5 years to get to this stage, and it really depends on whether you've got that sort of time to invest in yourself, and if you have, that's brilliant. But otherwise, maybe just reach out
or join the apprenticeship as well. That's another option.
Definitely. Yeah.
Right, a final question for Dan. Anybody?
Hi, I'm Jared here. So obviously, all of the data for this app, you link yourself from a SQL or from a flat file and so on. But in theory, could you build an app that then allows a user to upload a data set and then, you process it and then show the results and visualize it?
So when you say data set, are you potentially talking about uploading an Excel file, for example?
Yeah, for example, so they get something from a model and they have a CSV or an Excel output and they just want to visualize it, or
yeah. I mean, how I've natively in Power Apps, the answer I think is no. But how I've dealt with that in the past is that you can actually build a user input form, and you can make use of the attachments functionality. So, for instance, I'm actually building something similar at the moment for a client. Submitting commercial valuations, but you use the Power App to kind of collect kind of the key data or metadata, as it were. But then the user can attach the CSV as an attachment. In my case, that would get stored within a SharePoint list as an attachment to that item. And then you'd use Power Automate to transfer that file from a SharePoint list into a SharePoint folder. And then it makes it much more easy to pull that data into Power BI. That's how I've approached it in the past. It seems a little bit convoluted, the fact that it has to go through multiple steps. But actually, once you've built it, it's automated. And as far as the user is concerned, they upload the data to Power Apps, and it just appears in the Power BI model. So from a user's perspective, it's it's not too clunky at all.
Okay, thanks.
Cool. Right, Dan. Superb presentation. Thanks for taking the questions as well.